Hello, my friends. Welcome back to Mindthread Stories. Tonight, I want you to imagine a small island surrounded by freezing water. Dark waves crash against the rocks. A cold wind moves through the air. In the distance, you can see the lights of San Francisco, so close, yet impossibly far away. On this island stood one of the most feared prisons in American history. Alcatraz Federal Penitentiary. People called it the Rock. Some of America's most dangerous criminals were sent there. Murderers, gang leaders, bank robbers, men considered too dangerous for ordinary prisons. The prison was designed for one purpose: to make escape impossible. Cold ocean currents surrounded the island. The water was freezing. Strong tides pulled violently through the bay. Guards watched constantly from tall towers. Steel bars, locked doors, and armed officers existed everywhere. For decades, nobody successfully escaped. At least, that's what the government claimed. Because in 1962, 3 prisoners disappeared into the night, and to this day, nobody knows what truly happened to them. Alcatraz was not an ordinary prison. Long before it became famous, the island had been used as a military fortress. Later, it became a federal prison for the most difficult inmates in America. Men who caused violence in other prisons were often sent there. Life inside Alcatraz was harsh and extremely controlled. Prisoners spent most of their time alone, inside tiny cells. Each cell contained only a bed, a sink, a toilet, and cold concrete walls. Silence filled the prison corridors. Guards enforced strict rules every single day. Many prisoners described Alcatraz as psychologically isolating. The isolation slowly affected people's minds. Yet perhaps the cruelest part of Alcatraz was this: prisoners could see the city of San Francisco from their windows. Freedom was always visible in the distance, but unreachable. At night, the glowing city lights reminded prisoners of the outside world they had lost. Some inmates eventually lost hope completely. Others became obsessed with escaping. Imagine standing inside a cold prison cell while freedom shines right in front of you every single night, close enough to see, but impossible to touch. For some prisoners, that feeling slowly became an obsession, and among those prisoners was a man named Frank Morris. Among the prisoners inside Alcatraz was a man named Frank Morris. Morris was intelligent, extremely intelligent. From a young age, he had repeatedly escaped from reform schools and prisons. Authorities considered him dangerous, partly because of his intelligence. He arrived at Alcatraz in 1960. But Morris was not an ordinary criminal. He was quiet, patient, and highly observant. While other prisoners lost hope, Morris studied the prison carefully, every routine, every guard movement, every weakness. But Morris was not alone. 2 brothers were also imprisoned there, John Anglin and Clarence Anglin. The Anglin brothers had grown up working on farms and swimming in dangerous waters. Unlike many prisoners, they remained calm and disciplined. Slowly, the three men formed a secret partnership. And over time, they discovered something important. Behind the small ventilation openings inside their cells, the concrete had weakened because of moisture and age. It was a tiny weakness, but sometimes tiny weaknesses can change history. Slowly, the idea of escape stopped feeling impossible, and the men began creating one of the most famous prison escape plans in history. The escape plan developed slowly and patiently. For months, the prisoners secretly chipped away at the damaged concrete, using homemade tools, spoons, small metal objects, even a homemade drill created from a vacuum cleaner motor. Every night they worked quietly inside their cells, while music played during prison activity hours. The noise helped hide the sounds of digging, and little by little, the opening behind the walls grew larger. Piece by piece, the openings behind the walls became larger. Behind the prison cells existed a narrow, hidden corridor that guards rarely inspected. The prisoners crawled through the darkness silently, while the prison slept above them. But perhaps the strangest part of the plan involved the beds. The men created realistic fake heads using soap, paper, paint, and real human hair collected from the prison barbershop. At night, these fake heads rested quietly on their pillows. From a distance, guards believed the prisoners were asleep. Meanwhile, above the prison, inside hidden maintenance areas, the men secretly built another critical part of the escape, a raft. Not from wood, not from metal, but from stolen raincoats. More than 50 rubber raincoats were transformed into an inflatable raft, designed to survive the freezing waters of San Francisco Bay. The plan sounded absurd, yet somehow it was working. Night after night, hope quietly grew inside the darkness of Alcatraz. Then finally, the night arrived. June 11th, 1962. Darkness covered Alcatraz Island. Guards continued their normal routines. Everything appeared quiet, but inside their cells, the prisoners were preparing to disappear. One by one, the men climbed through the openings behind their cells. They moved silently through the hidden passages above the prison, carrying homemade life jackets and the raft. They slowly reached the roof of Alcatraz. Cold wind moved violently across the island. Below them waited the freezing black water of San Francisco Bay. The escape itself was incredibly dangerous. Even strong swimmers could easily die in those waters. The temperatures were brutally cold. Powerful currents pulled toward the open ocean. Some experts believed survival was impossible. Yet the men continued. Eventually, they disappeared into the darkness, and history would never fully know what happened next. The next morning, guards began their routine inspection. At first, nothing seemed unusual. Prisoners appeared asleep in their beds. But then, one guard touched a prisoner's head, and suddenly it rolled onto the floor. The prison immediately entered chaos. Sirens echoed across the island. Armed guards searched every building. Flashlights moved through the dark prison corridors. Nobody could believe what had happened. Helicopters circled above the water. Boats searched the bay. The FBI launched a massive investigation, but the prisoners were gone. During the search, investigators discovered pieces of the escape equipment, parts of the raft, life jackets, and personal belongings floating in the water. Yet no bodies were ever found, and that created a mystery that still exists today. The question soon became famous across America. Did the escapees survive? Officials publicly claimed the men probably drowned. The freezing water and violent currents made survival seem unlikely, but many people were not convinced. Over the years, strange reports continued appearing. Some witnesses claimed they saw the brothers after the escape. Others believed the men successfully reached land and disappeared under new identities. In 2013, authorities even revealed a strange letter, supposedly written by one of the escapees. The letter claimed, "Yes, we all made it that night." But investigators could never fully confirm whether the letter was real, and so the mystery remained alive, lost somewhere between truth and legend. Perhaps the story of Alcatraz fascinates people because it represents something deeply human, the desire for freedom, even in seemingly impossible situations. Frank Morris and the Anglin brothers were criminals, but their escape required extraordinary patience, intelligence, and courage. For more than 60 years, people around the world have continued asking the same question. What truly happened beyond Alcatraz Island? Did they drown beneath the freezing waves? Or did they accomplish the impossible? Nobody knows. And perhaps that is why the story never dies. And here you are, my friend, listening to this story in English, learning sentence by sentence, story by story. Maybe sometimes progress feels slow. Maybe some goals seem impossible at first. But history often reminds us of something important. Human beings are capable of extraordinary determination, even inside places designed to destroy hope. Thank you for spending this time with Mindthread Stories. And until next time, stay curious.